Welcome, everybody. My name is Arjun Roy, producer, recordist, and mix engineer, sitting here in beautiful Grande Prairie, Alberta, which is my hometown. I'm recording at the legendary Better Than Fred's, a fine bar, venue, and purveyor of fine barbecue. So first of all, thank you for checking this out. Please hit subscribe and smash that little bell if you haven't already to stay updated. If you're watching this on Facebook, hit like. Feel free to share if you wish. So welcome to another episode of The Hometown Hustle, which is what I'm calling a series of unedited conversations between myself and some of my dear friends instrumental in the art and music scene in the Peace region in the early 2000s when I was coming up as a musician and an artist. This is specifically about my artistic journey and the scene that helped me get where I am today. So this episode is a continuation of the conversation between myself and my friend Brandon Mann. Brandon, welcome back. I feel like last time we covered our background a bunch, a lot of our influences, as well as our arrival in GP and seeing bands at Howler's Lounge, maybe leading up to the year 2002, I think prior to the formation of the band No One's Alone for me. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So some notable bands that were around at that time and performers that were starting at that start of the music scene in Grande Prairie there. We had mentioned a few of them in the last one, which is like Bella Bella and a bunch of other bands.
Yep.
Rocksmith was around for sure. And then there was some bands like that Mike Monroe was in.
And we covered those a little bit. Higgins was one that I didn't see because they were kind of, maybe they were transitioning to something else at the time.
It was the second incarnation, whatever. What was the
In Between?
In Between, I think. Yeah. I think it must have been that I seen Mike, because I recall seeing Mike play here before it was Better Than Fred's, which was Sharks. And it must have been before the music scene thing. I just must have been here with friends, having drinks and stuff like that. And I remember watching Mike, and it was a very they were playing a bunch of Tool songs and some metal, which I really liked. But it's a standout memory for me because they had these two really long tables in the bar near the stage, and Mike had a wireless rig, which nobody had because
totally.
He's worked at the music store, so he had this wireless rig, and he'd get on top of these gigantic tables and run back and forth on them, like playing a solo and stuff like that. And it was the craziest cool thing I've seen.
It's incredible,
time, right?
Absolutely.
Now, so there were those bands, and there was a bunch of group of people that were very much around Howlers. We mentioned in the previous one, you're jamming with Eric Walsh and Jeremy McCracken and playing metal tunes and Howlers, but there was some really good performers there. I remember in the early days there, Kathy O'Neill, who was actually the bartender at Howlers, right?
After you mentioned that before, I started thinking, I remember her as the bartender, and her stage name was...
No, just Kathy O'Neill.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, was she Peppermint Patty, or was that someone else?
She sang a song called Peppermint Patty.
Okay.
And she had a CD. I actually still have that CD.
That's right.
It's a really good... she had quite a few really good songs and stuff like that. I have no idea what happened to her. I think she moved away and did something else. But obviously, she got past the being a bartender at Howlers. So
she has a whole other life now, of course. Okay.
So there was that, and then there was Shane Seward, and this was before the Prevail days.
Right.
I remember him playing quite a bit of covers on the acoustic guitar. In fact, one time I think he played covers through acoustic guitar through a JCM 900 one time. The acoustic was plugged into the guitar
at Howlers.
Yeah.
Because
maybe there wasn't I don't know. Maybe it was just to make the guitar louder, or the mixer did it they were working off of. There was no gear then, right? At that time, this was really rudimentary stuff.
Right.
You know what? Right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't know what the mixer was like, but I just remember him plugged in through a good half stack with acoustic, but playing on clean, obviously. And he played songs like Wonderwall and stuff like that.
Totally.
Yeah. And so he was really into that thing, which was a lot different than what he was playing later on in Prevail. But he was definitely a big part of the music scene.
100%.
I think
I would say one of the premier vocalists in town and the whole area. I mean, he had a great sense of pitch, great performance vibe. Really, he was I should say, a sensational performer and a really big talent. I remember, again, based on our chat with Justin, I didn't realize that what he was doing in Prevail was kind of outside his wheelhouse, and then he kind of went into that because, when I first saw Prevail, they just seemed like a band that they fit together perfectly, and they just showed up kind of fully formed. But it totally makes sense thinking about what they did later. That his first foray, or I suppose his he showed up at Howlers doing like the I don't know, I guess I would call it the Anne Boleyn Dashboard Confessional kind of acoustic
like
vibe,
acoustic,
which makes sense. Okay,
and maybe I'm totally wrong about that JCM 900 thing, but I swear to God, I remember that.
There was one there. I don't know if it belonged to somebody who just left it there, or they would always bring it in or something.
I don't know. I just remember him plugged into that thing and thinking it was very weird, but it worked. It definitely sounded fine and stuff like that. But maybe I totally made that up, but in my memories, I mean, this is 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Or pretty close to. The other groups that were around, like A Certain Something was at that time. And we talked about Mac Hasfield, but earlier on for my music stuff, because I seen Mac play in Spirit River and stuff like that with a completely different like rock-oriented band that covered like Deftones and stuff like that.
Right.
And then he was in Certain Something, which was a completely different project, which was, they had like saxophone, like Bryce Burge playing saxophone and things like that.
A percussion section, and I have to point out Nathan Stevens playing didgeridoo. Man,
on certain songs,
Nathan is like a virtuosic didge player. I don't know if he still plays or whatever, but I remember just being blown away at the combination, that combination of players, and when Nathan let it rip on the didge, it was really cool. I appreciated that.
Very different sound for sure, and it was it definitely, there was such a diversity at that time starting, and that kind of continued on, and like we'll talk about like Welfare Jared and the Paydays and stuff like that. Gosh. Which was it's a very it all fit because of that, right? Everybody it was a diverse music scene almost off the bat, right? So
everyone was doing something completely different, you know, and it all worked.
Now, I don't know the dates on this stuff or anything like that, but it was it was early on in the No One's Alone days. Maybe No One's Alone was already going at this time or not, but I also recall a band called Dirty Lemur, which was Ken Orr.
Yes.
Sean Thompson and Henry.
Henry was on bass at that time?
Yeah, Henry's on bass. Okay. Yeah. And I don't know if there was another guitar player. There could have been. Right. I don't know. It was such a long time ago. But all I know is that for Cadel, who's the singer of No One's Alone, and myself, and Cadel was eventually the lead singer of the band that I was in with, the same band, which is Landsguard. We were very influenced by them, based on the influences they were going off.
Ken and those guys,
because they were like in the COC type of vibe, that stoner rock kind of thing, right? So, because of that, so that band, and I think they called themselves Notch later on, maybe.
Yeah, I don't remember if there was a shuffling of band members.
Maybe
or what,
it was before that they were called Notch.
Right.
I don't know.
So I think in the chronology of the Ken, Sean, Henry, and perhaps Matt Boucher kind of thing, there was, as Justin mentioned before, the early version of that, they were called Rubber Johnson, and then, Notch or Dirty Lemur, in some order. But they always had that COC grunge stoner rock vibe. And I mean, Ken is like a fantastic singer and like a very compelling front person, and they had like again, we're talking about diversity of music in the scene, and they had their own thing going, and it was fantastic.
Tall guy with the James Hetfield vibe. It worked. Yeah,
exactly.
Sure.
That was back when Ken had a long hair and a long beard. The other band, there was Stacey Brown and Pillbox that was around. Yes.
I don't know if that was before or after that time, but it was around that time.
It was around that time. Yep.
And then of course, like, we might as well get into the No One's Alone stuff, I guess, at this point, right? Yep. Because that kind of describes the music scene. Howlers was pretty on point at that time. I mean, it certainly wasn't perfect every Friday night or whatever. I don't know when they did open mics, maybe Wednesday nights or whatever, but I don't know. I was going down a lot, and then that's kind of when we were hanging out a bunch, I think. And then, so that's when the black box thing, somehow we got a hold of the black box, and then talked about it in the previous podcast there about how that was kind of like an early moment where like 4 of the members that kind of started without a drummer of No One's Alone, which is you, Neil, Cadel, and Vince, were all kind of in the same room together all of a sudden.
Yep.
And that kind of started a few things. And then I think that it started out, and I don't, let's see. You guys must have started jamming at the Rising Society some point thereafter.
Yep.
It was more closer to the next summer though.
Exactly. Yep.
After that, it must have been because I think that the Black Box was in the fall. You guys probably played a bunch like over the time. There was no drummer though, right?
No, there wasn't.
Yeah.
The entire drummer thing began the following spring, as you mentioned, with this kid Bryce from Red Deer, who I don't remember what the connection was, but you mentioned that actually he and his dad played at BJ's, and Cadel met them somehow.
That must have been. It was the spring because I think by that summer it was SummerSlam that summer.
Which was crazy to think to consider because we had started being a band that fall or started to jam that fall. We played and played, wrote a couple of things, and they did. You know, and we got the springtime. We got a drummer. We jammed with this kid Bryce, and then Stacy Arbeau. You know, again, fantastic drummer, awesome human being. He was like a session drummer here in town and played with a ton of bands already. But he kind of walked by and heard us jam. I think at the time maybe Bryce wasn't there, or maybe or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know.
Stacey heard us play, and then he kind of.
How I remember it, so Bryce was only there for like a weekend, right? He wasn't playing regularly. Him and his dad were in town. They were from Red Deer in a band that was playing BJ's, and I don't know who it was that like figured that. I think that somebody, either Cadel or Neil, ran into Bryce downtown somehow, right?
That's right. I'm pretty sure it was Cadel.
Yeah, and it was just walking by, and they started talking to each other, and then he came, and you guys. So before that had happened, like some early No One's Alone stuff in the wintertime that happened was that I remember being in Neil's basement, right? And you guys recording a couple songs with through the sound card of a computer and using like
the computer mic.
You remember those old little mics that stood on a desk that
exactly.
Yeah.
They speak it
you never ever use again.
Kind of crappy old Logitech mic.
And I remember you guys like recording something and sticking into acoustic inside the acoustic or something like that.
Yeah.
Doing some crazy stuff to try to get something that sounded good out of this, $5 microphone, right? That probably came with a computer, right?
Exactly.
Yep. And we did a lot of back in that day. There was a lot of recording through sound cards, which
absolutely
definitely is not the best thing ever. But
no,
you guys did.
We're talking 2002, 2003.
Yeah.
No. Yeah. It was
you guys, and most like a lot of us did. Like you were doing whatever we could to try to do something. Right?
We didn't have stuff. Right? Exactly.
There was no such thing as USB interfaces and stuff like that.
Oh my gosh, not even like phones that you could record on now. Like, oh my god, no.
I'm pretty sure if I listened back at we burnt it to CD and stuff like that. I think we're using like Adobe Audition or I think it was called Cool Edit Pro before that.
Cool Edit
right?
Pro.
You guys were using, and eventually Landsguard used it as well. But freeware that was but it recorded.
It did the trick.
And then it burned it. You could burn it to CD and then go for a rip in the truck and
cruise around.
Listening
to your CD.
Yeah, and then I think so. A lot of those early demos that you guys did, which I still have all of them actually.
Awesome.
So, no drums, just like the guitars,
guitar and vocals,
and maybe I think bass too, right? Yeah. And so that's a cool memory that you guys how you guys started recording, and then to get drums on some of that stuff, that's when you guys for that brief moment in time, you guys had that Bryce to drum, and you guys hooked up brought the computer down and hooked up. I don't know, maybe you guys rented a mic or two from Long McQuaid. I don't even know, but you recorded some drums onto a couple tracks.
We did.
You had one or two tracks there, right? And then he left, and then as you said, Stacy, I wasn't there. I don't think. When Stacy was walking by the Rising Society when you guys were playing, that kind of definitely changed the whole thing. about the Rising Society, Vince was actually like, he was staying there.
He was staying there for a while.
Jammed,
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think he said one day that he's like he hears footsteps in the back stairwell, because it was like he slept in the basement.
Yeah,
and the basement, like, it was decked out to be like a youth center or something like that at one point in time. But
some pool tables and some things.
The basement was a morgue at one point in time, right? It was like dead bodies were like prepared down there.
I had no idea.
Oh yeah, and he knew that. Yeah, and he was telling me one day that back then, he's like, there's footsteps in the stairwell at night. I'm like, dude, don't tell me these things.
No, stop. Exactly.
Yeah.
We don't need to know this. Yeah.
That room, though, that you guys played in, which was like the actual church portion, sounded like old Sabbath, when you guys played there. Because, I mean, you had like the full
stacks.
Yeah. And
loud guitars. Yeah. Amplified vocals.
Yeah. Sounded great.
It did sound great. You know, and
if you could have had modern day recording equipment to record that room, that would have been pretty awesome.
Absolutely, man. Oh my gosh, I'm so creeped out by this morgue business. I had no idea, and the ghost stories. But okay.
So,
oh gosh,
that fast forward, Stacy joins the band. You guys jammed a bunch, and then you guys got a gig at SummerSlam, right?
Which was insane, because SummerSlam, again, to put things into perspective, was like a massive outdoor festival. You know, the year that we played. The Headstones were there. Randy Bachman was there. Who else? Nazareth was there. You mentioned this artist Lennon, who was like supposed to be the next big like rock thing in Canada, was there. And I mean, there were a ton of artists. And the thing that was interesting was we played the beer garden stage like all weekend.
Yeah.
You know, essentially like. And again, I have to give a big shout out to folks like Graham Johnson and Byron Johnson. Byron was the namesake of the club BJ's, which is where Long McQuaid exists now. He passed away some years ago. And his son Graham, again, they were instrumental in a lot of musical events happening, a lot of promotion, all sorts of stuff.
Yeah,
I
think you guys played BJ's a bunch before that.
We cut our teeth playing Howlers
and BJ's, not so much Sharks. You guys played Sharks at that time, and I remember like you guys bringing in the Howlers stage, basically, which was just 1 foot platform off the ground, and you guys
with some
we had
carpeting.
They had some carpeting on it, and so you brought like 3 of those pieces, and they moved a pool table over where the stage is actually now. Right. It was like a gaming area with a pool table.
Yeah.
It wasn't raised at all. It wasn't
raised at that
time.
No.
That's why you guys brought the risers.
It wasn't like for drums. No. It was for like Oh my gosh.
It was only it must have been they renovated it at some point in time, and that's when I must have seen. So maybe Mike played in the same way. I don't know. I can't remember. Maybe it was later on. Maybe it was during No One's Alone time that I did see Mike. Maybe it was not as early as I thought it was. So maybe it was whatever
2002, 3, something like that. And so SummerSlam was again.
I digress.
Great. No, it's all good, man.
So the things so about SummerSlam. So the memories of SummerSlam that I can remember is the things that my experience on it that were that stage that you guys were on was definitely like the most dangerous thing.
Oh, of course.
Dude, it was like tables basically that were just
tables.
It's like tables like this that were sitting together and no carpet over top. I mean, you could see the cracks, like
exactly,
and them shifting around with your guys' weight. I don't know that, and it was on unlevel ground.
I was gonna say because it's outdoors, so it was on grass and dirt and all that kind of stuff, And I remember that we played BJ's a bunch. That's how Graham knew about us, and offered us to play all weekend. So I mean, we played like 3 nights. We played a solid like
with
2 or 3 sets, with a caveat that we would
we had to work.
I mean,
which was a pleasure, honestly, because like we got to, and I joined in on this because I was taking pictures and I got a free ride into the festival because of knowing these guys. And I was only there 2 of the nights.
Okay.
I wasn't there when Randy Bachman played. So, but the Headstones. But I just remember like unloading Nazareth's stuff off of their thing, and I remember the roadies being older than they were.
Yeah.
And
oh my gosh,
like opening up these like these flight cases.
Yeah. Yep.
That had been around the world.
Absolutely.
And there's like Marshall's, like like Marshall cabinets in them and stuff like that. And I just was like, it was the coolest experience. And
it was a heck of an experience. I mean, and so for us, again, the caveat was that we would work and help them set some stuff up.
Yeah.
And so the cool thing is that, when we showed up on day one to help out, it was this company out of Calgary that was supplying some of the PA plus the sound guys. And so I remember seeing these sound guys at shows for the next few years, and they remembered us and we helped them out, and so we were working on putting the PA together, tuning the PA system outdoors. And so, I mean, like, I learned a ton about live sound just over the course of that weekend. So we helped them set all the stuff up. We would haul speakers around, change the angle on these massive speakers that were hanging up. Climb up the rig.
To plug them in and
That's
everything
exactly
like that. I remember doing that.
Yep. Exactly.
Stuff that was probably more dangerous than like the lawsuits could have been real, honestly, because like we're unpaid like labor, right?
Completely.
That should not have been doing some of that stuff.
Yeah, but hey, you know what? We got to play all weekend. We got into the festival for free. They gave us a bunch of drink tickets, and honestly, I mean, like, Graham set up a lot of good hospitality.
Oh,
and I mean, treated us like, a real band. I mean, that's kind of a weird thing to say, but that's how it felt. Just being musicians who had been playing in a band for just a few months, and I mean, obviously, like, I will give the band a lot of credit because we played our butts off and we practiced a lot. So we were like pretty tight. And it was the kind of rock music that would fly at this kind of thing. And so, we earned a bit of it, but Graham taking the chance, I mean, it's incredible. And so that weekend was a lot of fun because we would help out, do some setup, and then we were good to go because once the show would begin, all the bands would show up, they would play, we would help certain bands load on and off, and then we could enjoy watching the music, and then we would go play in the beer gardens all evening. And again, there was one of those situations where, much like playing BJ's, being out amongst, real people who come to see music who are not your friends. I mean, we learned so much about stagecraft, owning the stage, like, being a band, and bringing confidence to the stage and performing, drawing the audience in, but and also most importantly, reading the audience and figuring out what was working and not working. And
also not what was not working or what was working and not working inside the band.
100%.
Which I think that was that weekend in particular that settled a few things for sure. That led to certain things happening. But I'll get to that. I want to get to that in a second though. With the the crazy part is that was the summer. That was probably you guys must have had, I don't know, it was probably 8 songs at least at that time. I don't think you were playing covers either. I think you guys were just playing the same 8 songs. You definitely weren't playing covers at that time. Covers came later,
which is a heck of a thing because usually bands play covers, get the opportunities to go out and gig and stuff, and we just wrote original music, and somehow that worked. And so, we had not more than 8 tunes. Maybe. We drew them out. And one of the things that the band was good at was jamming a bunch. And so, I mean, we would just draw out the middle of a song or the, outro choruses of songs for a long time. But it did the trick, so that was good.
And I think that Napkin song was written at that time by that time.
Napkin song was written by that time. That was
because it was in Howlers that was written,
in Howlers.
Which was kind of it was like a spur of the moment thing, right?
Which which is like those are the kinds of
I definitely remember
artistic
that
stories that
I remember that night that happened actually, and it was pretty cool that like I seen you guys. Like we always sat in the kind of the same corner at Howlers, and it was written in that corner. Remember,
of course,
right? Like and I'd go for a smoke or whatever, and then come back, and like another part of the song was like written by you guys.
We were waiting really to go on stage for an open mic or something, just to play the material that we had. And again, as I was saying, kind of mentioning to Justin that was a moment where we as writers gelled, and so that was a song that wasn't like a Cadle song that we all played. It was a song that all of us wrote together, which made it extra special. And and it was good. I mean, it really kind of affirmed that it could work. And so we just went kind of full on for a while.
I got a gear question for you. What were you playing for gear before the JCM 800?
Before the JCM 800, so here's the funny thing. I didn't own an amp for a while.
Yeah.
The only amp I ever had, again, I have to always give props to my parents for all their support when I was younger.
Yeah.
I dropped out of university and I wanted to do music, and then I was all about doing music, and I threw myself into that. And they, again, for a Christmas present with comp sci, of course. So for a Christmas present, there was a musician in Hay River, Northwest Territories, this guy Lance, who was a few years older than I was, but an incredible player. I saw him and his band. They played the school for some reason, the high school, and they played like Aussie covers and Metallica
Legends
and Megadeth
Hay
stuff.
River, I betcha.
100%. And they were so good. And so I talked to him a bunch, and Lance happened to be selling some gear, and so my parents purchased a PV Predator guitar, Strat knockoff, and a PV Rage 108 amp. That was like this big. It was like a foot square kind of thing. So I had that. Eventually, I was here in town. I still had that amp. Excuse me. But then I ran out of... sorry, I got to check. That's all good. Eventually, I needed some more amplification. So I ended up playing, just jamming for fun with some people that I knew. Dustin Evans being one of them. I don't know if you know Dustin, but Dustin was a friend of... he was part of a group of friends that I knew in college, I think before you and I really started hanging out. And Dustin had a PV trans tube. Remember those things? They're like, I think it was a 212. Maybe it was a 112. I'm not sure. But it was like a rectangular thing this big, probably like 25 watts of tube kind of sound.
Yeah.
And so he let me borrow that. He said, hey, I play guitar, but I'm not really using this thing. Why don't you borrow it? Well, I don't know how this came about, but I borrowed that for like several months. And I kept asking him whenever I'd see him at college, like, would you need the amp back? He's like, well, do you have an amp? I'm like, no. He's like, well, just hang on to it for a while longer. And so that's what I had. And so whoever I was jamming with at the time, my parents would drop me off at some place. By that time they'd moved to No, this was before that. So somehow I would get this amp to wherever I was going to jam, because I was here by myself at the time. And that's what I did. So I had my Slammer Explorer. I think I had my Slammer Explorer at that time. With the chain strap and this trans tube.
Maybe pre-chain strap, but it was definitely, I think,
Yep, I had the Explorer, and I had this borrowed trans tube amp, and that's what I used, until, as a some kind of combined every occasion of the year present, I got the JCM 800 thing, the full stack.
Yeah, but what were you playing with, Jer and Eric? What were you playing then?
The trans tube.
Was it?
It was the trans tube.
And you must have, so the black box, you took the trans tube.
The trans tube, yep.
Because I think that it was that summer. Did you have you didn't have the 800. You must have been playing that trans tube at SummerSlam.
That's a good point. I think so, because I got the 800. It must have been that summer, because how can I forget JCM 800 day?
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
It was that summer, so I wasn't playing the 800 until, when was that? The end of the summer? Middle of the summer?
It was probably late July. So SummerSlam was early July.
It was,
I think.
Exactly.
And then late July, me, you, and Vince went down to Edmonton, and you sat in
downtown Long McQuaid.
All day.
Yeah.
The whole day.
Playing a bunch of amps.
Like
the entire day.
Well, probably from about noon. We drove there. We went to Long McQuaid. You sat there until they pretty much closed.
Yeah.
And then decided on amp like 15 minutes beforehand. And pulled the trigger on a full stack JCM 800.
Yeah. And again, a thing to consider is that, Edmonton is a 5-hour drive away, should we say. So we left early that morning, as early as we could, got to Edmonton by noon or so. Maybe we stopped for some food before rolling into Edmonton, but then we went straight to Long McQuaid. And I played a bunch of stuff. I played,
using every cent that you probably made from KFC.
Well, right.
Yeah. You were working at KFC.
I was working at KFC at the time.
You were, yeah.
I was. Yeah, absolutely. That was a good time.
Your folks were definitely living in Grande Prairie at that time.
Point. They were. I think they moved to 2002 or 3.
Yeah. It'd have been 2000. This is 2002. We're talking. I thought
2000 and SummerSlam was 2003 for sure.
It was. Yeah. So they moved. 2002 would have been the black box.
Exactly.
At the end of
so my folks moved either fall 2002 or spring 2003, something like that. And so that's when I acquired the JCM 800, and from then on, I went everywhere.
Which conveniently fit in a Sonoma box, right?
Which
GMC
is what
Sonoma,
you drove.
Exactly.
Now,
it fit perfectly.
An entire full stack.
Yeah.
That's good information to know.
You can fit very much else in, which we'll talk about in a second.
Exactly.
But
so that's when when I acquired that, and we drove home with Vince sitting uncomfortably in the back seat with all of our stuff. That was a heck of a time.
Yeah.
That was a heck of a time.
So then that must have been shortly after that, there was a gig at BJ's, right?
Yep.
And that's when I think because of the gigs at SummerSlam, that's when Vince left the band which not of his choosing, but Vince is an awesome guy. He's very creative. He actually did a lot of the first artwork for No One's Alone.
Yeah, exactly. He drew and painted a bunch of stuff, put it all together.
Yeah, and I think you guys and then definitely brought something. But his playing style, he's definitely more of he's a guitar player by heart, and he certainly that's what he plays mostly to this day.
Yeah,
and the bass thing, I think he was filling that niche and wanted to be a part of this thing.
Yep.
But at some point when you got Stacy in the band and you guys are getting these more gigs and they're paying more and things like that.
Yep.
And I think that it made him, he needed to get to a certain level or not, right? And unfortunately he didn't, I think. And you guys just chose and decided that it was best to part ways at that time, which, probably a hard decision because of how good of a guy he is. But I mean, that's just how things go, right?
Yeah, so. And those are some of the lessons that you learn by going through this process. For me, I wasn't good at that, which is why Cadle did it.
Yeah.
I knew it was a thing that had to happen, but I just felt terrible. But at that point, I couldn't kind of separate like the professional relationship from the personal relationship. It was all kind of wrapped up in one because we'd started as pals, and then the band thing came along.
And I definitely don't want to paint Stacy as the bad guy in this situation, but he definitely brought this level of professionalism to the band.
100%.
That he called him out.
He totally did.
Not to Vince, but he called it. He brought it to attention that
he called
there
out
was
the situation,
issues.
Of course. And he was correct.
He was
and
right.
That's one thing that I got to give Stacy props for is that level of professionalism. He'd been around the block. He'd played a bunch. He'd performed. He'd been in cover bands, that kind of thing. And so, for him to be part of the band, again, it leveled us up here. And then anything detracting from that, especially something that was not subjective, but very objective, like this is not working, these skills are not here, we need to either work on it or, switch up.
This was moving so quickly. By that time, so you had you guys are already lined up for a gig at what's the Tumbler Ridge thing called?
Grizzfest. Oh my gosh, that's right. That was August.
That was in August of that year.
That was in August of that year.
Yeah.
So we played. So July we play SummerSlam, play a bunch of shows. I get a JCM 800 full stack. We switch out bass players, and then Sean McDonald, again to his credit, consummate pro, awesome dude, really good bass player, comes on board, and we had he had a week of practice with us.
Yeah,
and he debuted with No One's Alone at Grizzfest in Tumbler Ridge.
With everybody playing red guitars.
With everybody playing red. How did that even happen? Including Sean. I don't know. Yeah. Which was funny. But
I look back on those pictures. That's what I see. I'm like, how did they all get red guitars?
They all had. We all got the memo. That's why.
Yeah. So because Neil was playing the Epiphone SG.
Epiphone. That's right.
And the kiddos were playing the Epiphone Les Paul.
That's right.
Of course, your Slammer.
Yep.
And a Fender bass.
Totally. Which the show went amazingly well. part of
that's so the JCM 800 comes back to this because you needed to bring the whole JCM 800 in the back of my vehicle. So we had all our stuff in the back seat, right? Just me and you going down to Tumbler.
Yep.
And we get there, and the funny thing is that I think you guys used like line gear, right?
We had to use backline gear
because
the whole Grizzfest thing. I think part of it was like as with everything back in the day, some kind of battle of the bands. So everyone played, and then if you made it, if somebody voted for you somehow, then you would get to play the next night. Before I think it was Wide Mouth Mason and somebody else, and so. We show up, and in all the communication, we didn't realize that we could only play backline. So we did, and it was like a JC, it was like a DSL 2000 or something like that. So, thank you for hauling the gear, and we totally can't use it. So could have just brought my guitar.
It looked really cool in the back of my truck.
Yes.
So,
oh my gosh. Of course, fitting perfectly in the Sonoma.
A couple things I remember from Grizzfest that. It sounded great. That was like probably that was the first time that you guys, because it all started clicking. Definitely, the sound was because it's Grizzfest. The sound was awesome.
Yeah,
right.
The pros work in the front house.
Yeah,
monitors, everything.
Even with Sean being very new, that was all good. I remember Cadel getting would wander off, and it was kind of like my job for some reason to go and find him or whatever. So I'd go walking around Tumbler Ridge and because everybody's like, "Where's Cadel?" I'm like, "I'll go and take a look or whatever."
Cadel's, I guess he was some kind of free spirit.
I don't know.
Kind of person
anyways,
or
I found him. I just go to the nearest place that sold coffee, basically, and then I find him writing in his notebook.
Of course,
that was his MO at the time.
That was his thing. He would go find a spot with coffee, write in his notebook, and a bunch of those notebook writings would become lyrics.
And that's that time. It's important to talk about that because that's kind of when me and Cadel started becoming friends at that time. Right?
Exactly.
So I was friends with you.
Yep.
Cadel was still I'd known you for a while, but I didn't know Cadel as well, right? I actually was more closer friends to Vince at that time than Cadel actually.
Totally.
So which is weird to think that. And then the other thing about Grizzfest that's really, really funny is the campground situation, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
we're all camping.
Yeah, the bands got camped this section of the campground, which is really close to town. To our everybody got campground space, so it was really cool walking around. Like everybody was playing music that night, and partaking in adult beverages, and it was just really cool to walk. You could just walk from campsite to campsite and sit down and just watch people play or play yourself or whatever. Right. The other memory I have of that is that Stacy's tent was a pile of garbage, and it was like. It was like one of those tents. No, really. Yeah, you don't remember that?
No.
Yeah, okay, so it was like one of those orange tents or yellow tents that Boy Scouts use or whatever, but it had no floor to it. Dude.
Oh my gosh.
And
no
he's
way.
Slept on the ground, man. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah, it was
so
that tent was as old as Stacy was.
Wow, man. Wow.
It was probably from his youth.
Sure,
I don't know.
Absolutely.
It was not. That's how I remember it. Yeah.
What a trooper!
Struggling, pounding on the stakes to get this thing up.
Oh my gosh, that's incredible, man. I don't know. Well, good call. I totally don't remember that.
Yeah. But it was a really cool atmosphere that night, and
a really good vibe.
There was a lot of other good bands. Was Certain Something played that one?
Certain Something played, and so did Welfare Jare and the Paydays,
and a bunch. There's other bands that were.
There were
around
a few other GP bands. Did Rocksmith play that?
No, they didn't.
They didn't. No. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I remember Welfare Jare and the Paydays set because they played Heart Attack and Vine.
Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And it was interesting because as a band, I'd heard them a few times, I'd seen them a few times, and them, playing a Tom Waits tune completely made sense.
Yeah.
And it's funny because on the drive down, you and I listened to a bunch of CDs, including a bunch of Tom Waits.
Yeah.
And so again, seeing Welfare Jare and the Paydays covering Tom Waits, I suddenly like their whole deal made sense to me.
Yeah, and also they so it wasn't the first time I seen them, but what they used to do, which was interesting because later on, like the person was became a huge part of the GP music scene because of events that he was putting on, which was Chris Thiessen.
Yes.
And he would go up and they'd play this song called like Belly Dancer or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And he would go up and like pull his shirt up and like do a belly dance.
That's right.
Priceless.
It was amazing. Yeah. Well, it's funny because those are such precious moments.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't make that up,
That's what made Well for Jer so good. Like that their kookiness, totally off the wall stuff, right?
Completely.
And
zany.
Yeah, but it was all really good though, right?
Really good. So, great musicality. Yeah. And again, we're talking about artists owning stages. I mean, they really owned their sound.
Yeah.
When they did what they did, it worked perfectly, and no one else would be able to recreate it.
Yeah.
It was a very interesting thing. The chemistry was just right,
Yeah.
So it's August, and then fall 2003. I feel like we picked up our gigging a whole bunch. I mean, with No One's Alone, I just remember, after that summer, we played all over town, playing a lot. We played Sharks a few times. We did the New Year's show at Sharks a couple of years in a row. We played lots at BJ's. They would have us back all the time, which is amazing because we would, either open for bands that were there, or
this is all in 2004. You're talking about 2000, late 2003, early 2000,
exactly, 2004,
all through 2004, basically. It all was. I was around for a lot of it, and I remember just taking lots of. Like I took a lot of pictures at that time.
Of pictures, absolutely.
Lots got used on posters and stuff like that.
Yep. On our MySpace page.
Yeah, and I'd like help with moving gear if you needed or whatever and stuff like that. So, I definitely was not the roadie, but I definitely was just a friend of the band. Like I was like,
oh my gosh, absolutely.
I probably was like the first, maybe not only, but the first definitely like No One's Alone super fan for sure. But I mean, like I was friends with all you guys. Like at that point, like I'd been friends with Vince, you, Cadel. Like that started like Cadel was living in res and stuff like that, and like this, and eventually we became band members in our own project.
Right.
Landsguard and all that stuff and during that 2003 or 2004 time frame, like he was living in res, and I don't know, I would like talk to him about certain bands, and he like I burnt a copy of like Deliverance by COC
oh my gosh.
to him, and he loved it, and that's kind of
huge,
kind of kicked off like us talking about things, and he during that period of time with Cadel, like we'd hang out, and then he had some crazy notions or whatever to butcher his Les Paul, which was fine.
Oh, I remember that. Yes, indeed.
Like I say it lovingly. Like it was definitely just he wanted to do something on his own, and like. For like I say butcher, but I'm the one who butchered it because I'm the guy who'd like would take the soldering iron and pull all the pots out and take the neck pickup off, and so that it just had a bridge pickup. And he wanted to do that because he just wanted that one pickup because he was playing guitar still at that time.
Yeah, he was still. Yeah, so No One's Alone had a 3-guitar attack for much of the beginning of the band, and then slowly. We transitioned into Cadel just being a front person. Yeah,
I would say that some point he was still playing guitar around
on certain songs. Yeah, in 2004.
In summer of 2004. Because isn't that when you guys were at like Neil's uncle's shop and stuff like that?
Yeah. So one of the things we're talking about, the overarching story of this whole series of conversations is sort of like the scene, but also one of the things that. I have to give shout out to is sort of community support and like friend and family support. Like we being a rock band, I mean, obviously you need a place to jam. We had the Rising Society for a while, and then the place was going to be shut down and condemned and stuff, so we had to move somewhere else. So for a while after that, we jammed at Neil's grandparents' place.
What about Corey's? Was that later?
I think that was later because.
Are you sure? Okay.
we jammed at Neil's grandparents' place. We'd drive out to their farmhouse, essentially, 20 minutes out of town, which is amazing. Again, Neil's family was so supportive. All of our families were. They would help us out as much as they could. We jammed at their place. We would drive out twice a week.
Yeah.
I think they would be out, something like that, so that the rock music wouldn't, bother them really.
Yeah.
And so we would drive out. The amazing thing about that was that Neil's grandma is such a wonderful human, and she would leave out like a spread of food, whether for making sandwiches or, it was glorious because we'd show up, set up our stuff, and then kind of feel hungry because we'd been moving a bunch of gear, up and down staircases and stuff. We would take a break to eat some food, but the food was so good that we would like have a second dinner, and then we'd be so full and lethargic, and then we would play. So Cadel took the not eating, until after we'd played. But all of us were just like, we would get in, it would smell so good. We would, set up our gear, eat some food. Cadel would warm up. We would practice, and then Cadel would go eat because, there were times when he was so full, he just, he felt terrible singing. So that was one thing. Then, shout out to Corey Sewell, who was a good friend of the band's, who helped us out. She let us jam in her basement. Again, we did that a couple of times a week for months, that was one of those situations where we probably, we were in a neighborhood, and I'm sure like a rock band showing up with a bunch of instruments and then playing rock music in somebody's basement irritated the neighbors. So, the cops were called a couple of times, but because this was technically, before sort of noise law hours, they would just tell us to keep it down and, finish up by 11 or something like that, which we did. And so, again, we did that for months. And so thank you to Corey Sewell for helping us do that. And then that brings us to summer 2004, where we jammed at Neil's uncle's shop. And so this was like a, like an auto body shop or something. Right? And so, dusty floor, the whole thing. We would throw open the bay doors, plug in, set up, shut the doors, except in the summer we'd leave it open because it was very hot.
Yeah.
Practice all of our tunes, with dust blowing around and the whole thing. But we had to practice, so that's what we did. After that, I don't know where we practiced.
So I got during that time, one thing I remember, and this is like, like a secret, it's a dirty little secret of yours, right?
Yeah.
That for gear wise, right? That you were constantly during that time playing a metal zone.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
Like the through the JCM 800, which we didn't know any better, I guess is the long and short. And I think you had it dialed in so that everything was just like barely on, but giving it a boost. And really, if you would have taken that thing to GP Music and have been like, need something a little less, crazy.
Just plugged in like a tube screamer.
Tube screamer, super overdrive.
That would have been,
even an EQ pedal,
totally,
right? Any of that would have like
just a bit of a boost. Or something,
would have been much more better for you, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, the reason that happened is because, it got the JCM 800 because, again, of our shared love of like Zakk Wylde and all those bands whose MO was like guitar into Marshall pedals straight into a Marshall, And so that was the spirit in which the JCM 800 was acquired. But then at some point in time, I wanted to go from like very clean cleans to overdriven overdrives. And instead of buying, again, I didn't know any better, instead of buying a boost pedal or something like a tube screamer, I bought the metal zone because I thought,
it probably came with the PV Predator. That guitar pedal is like, everybody's
ubiquitous.
Got one.
Everyone, somehow.
If you don't have one, maybe you should have one.
Yeah, exactly. That's just it. It's a rite of passage,
Yeah.
And so I would throw that thing on. I think, I thought, okay, well, this is the pedal for solos. Like I need, the amp is crunchy enough for riffs, and then for solos, I need to kick it up a notch.
Yeah.
But of course, I didn't realize that, when you start throwing on a ton of gain, that's the wrong move. What you want is a boost, maybe a little bit of crunch, a little bit of compression. And so as I started playing through a half stack and we started playing rooms that were bigger and bigger and the gear was mic'd, I kept on dialing the gain back until it was barely at like 1, maybe a half, And so that would just give a little bit more sizzle for solos, it would boost a little bit. But still, it was not a very good signal path because
no,
I didn't know.
There's quite a few like
the time.
Neil played a valve state, which is I'd love to own a valve state nowadays because I know what it's good for, but it wasn't good for what you guys were playing.
No, that's
eventually I think he gained the triple X from Cato.
Yep.
But I mean, like you guys had like some like gear like on. You just didn't know none of us knew what we're doing.
No, that's
right?
just.
I mean, we're
no
recording things with like computer mics. So
of course, well, and that's the thing. That was all part of coming up, just trial and error, doing whatever we could based on what we had. You know, it was just necessity.
Yeah, you sounded pretty like nobody complained about your tone.
Yeah,
right? So I mean, like,
which is amazing.
You made it work.
For sure. I made it work. You know.
Yeah. And also the other gear thing at that time that you were doing was like you had this like crybaby pedal that was like. It was the snarliest. I don't know what was wrong with it. And you still have that thing, don't you?
I do. So what happened with that pedal was I came into it when we lived in Hay River. It was secondhand, bought from somebody else. Turns out there was something wrong with the wiring. So a buddy of mine at school at the time, you know, like who had grown up fixing stuff, was like, oh, clearly this thing is the problem. Bring it over. I'll redo the electronics or something like that. And yeah, I mean, you do something like that, the nature of the pedal is going to change. And so I don't know what it sounded like to begin with. Maybe it already sounded like that when I got it. But, you know, it was definitely noticeable because then when I was in a place with other musicians who had gear and other crybabies, suddenly I realized, it's something about, this is kind of different, you know? Like there's something about this pedal that is not like the others.
No. It was pretty
had a pronounced high mid-range perhaps.
Big time, yeah.
Absolutely. It didn't have that smooth sweep that we all desire in wah pedals.
Yeah, you made it work.
I made it work, and that's the thing. I made it work, you know, and I mean, I was totally one of those folks who played guitar until like my calluses fell off and like went to sleep with a guitar beside me, like because even at that time I was already starting to want to level up my chops. I was listening to like everything from Slayer to Yngwie Malmsteen. You know, I'd gotten like, you know, the Slash, Guns N' Roses,
Rob Halford.
Zach stuff, getting into Halford, and just getting progressively heavier and heavier. And so I was trying to get that facility into my fingers and do whatever I could, you know.
Yeah, Strapping on a Lad too. Like that was around that era that we went to. I think it was 2004
that was 2004. Strapping on a Lad, Stars on White.
Yeah.
You know, just blew my mind. You know, I remember cruising out to Grizzfest, listening to the Devin Townsend band's Accelerated Evolution, which is an incredible album. Incredible songwriting, guitar playing, just completely different energy than Strapping.
Works actually.
100%. Me too. It still holds up to anything that he's kind of put out now, for me anyway.
Yeah.
Strapping a Lad, and so that's what was up. And so No One's Alone wise, I feel like by the 2004 we played all over town. We'd started playing shows in Edmonton and Calgary, and I think we went to that Strip Down show thing in Calgary in 2004.
So during that time, leading up to that too, like I remember like having you having some massive like some equipment failures on stage too, and I'd come up there and like we'd be pulling apart stuff and like on the fly stuff.
On the fly,
so I did some of that. That was pretty fun to do that type of stuff. That because like both me and you were kind of gearheads and we're trying to figure things out. So when did you get off the metal zone though?
I got off the metal zone once I got my Triaxis. So, that's another thing that happened in 2004 that changed everything.
You were playing the Triaxis and No One's Alone?
Yeah.
Really?
I was playing that happened before we went into the studio in Calgary, which is the end of 2005. So I feel like fall 2004 is when that happened. I don't know why. I think it was because I wanted a greater variety of tones that I could switch through. So instead of buying more and more pedals or whatever, I traded in the original 800 full stack or half stack on a Triaxis, a Mesa Boogie Triaxis, and Simulclass 290 rack setup. And that was probably the best thing I did at the time because that was like a fully, MIDI switchable, programmable rack unit, and I could dial in as many tones or a variety of tones.
You could put the metal zone away.
And I put the metal zone away.
I have a little metal zone story though.
Okay.
Like I got to tell you, it's really quick. I had a metal zone, and of course, because everybody does, and I sold it when I lived in Lethbridge to a pawn shop there. And then for whatever reason, I wanted to buy another one. And I had to, so I found one on Kijiji and bought it. for like $30, right?
Hey man, that's the way to do it. Like, it's one of those things that you have a love-hate relationship with.
I just wanted
and then when you get rid of it, you feel bad.
Then I plugged it in, and I'm like, I plugged it in after I bought that thing for $30, and I'm like, well, I'm not going to pawn it again now.
Well, I have it back. I'm just going to put it over here.
We're just going to put it on the shelf, and it's another Boss pedal to display, I guess.
Absolutely, man. Those Boss pedals, I mean, now that's a whole thing. They. I should also mention at the time that talking about our gear nerding, and all of our gear stuff, you had given me like a fishing box. Like a fishing, a fishing box, to transport gear with.
It was a toolbox. It was a toolbox from
it had like all of your stickers and stuff on it. So I'd like put picks and stuff on the top and put my pedals and cables in the bottom and roll around with that. I'd put that on top of my half stack, pull out all the gear, plug in my pedals, and I'd be ready to go. And I think gave me a Boss flanger as well.
No, I didn't.
Didn't you?
No, I didn't give you a Boss flanger.
Sure?
I know, I didn't. No.
I thought that's where that flanger came from.
Nope.
Are you
Somebody
sure?
else did.
Somebody else did.
Yeah. I did give you a Crown Royal bag, though.
You did, which I put...
The Zach Wild chain in.
I guess we have to talk about the thing, At some point, again, owing to my love of Zach Wild, I decided that a really cool thing to do would be to get like a 6-foot length of chain from Home Hardware and, put some O-rings on that and snap that onto my guitar.
Was I there for that? I feel like I was there
Not
for
when
that.
I bought the chain from Home Depot. Sorry, from Home Depot or Home
Yeah,
Hardware? It would have been Home Hardware at the time.
No, Totem.
Totem.
Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know.
So I bought this and I was super excited. The funny thing is that chain essentially weighed as much as my entire guitar did.
Yeah.
And so it was just brutally awful to carry that around anywhere. And then, cool to put on my guitar and play, but it was so heavy I didn't realize how awful that was for my back and my neck and all that kind of stuff. Plus, maybe this is too much information, but I'm like a hairy guy. So I mean, like the chain would like pull out, hair on my shoulder and stuff like that. And it was just not a good thing to do. But I rocked that for like a long time. I feel like I played that well into 2004.
Yeah. Well, now we're getting the nitty gritty.
Exactly. Now I know this is what everyone's here for. The inside scoop.
Yeah.
But then so I would put that in the Crown Royal bag that you gave me. In the toolbox. And again,
I don't know. Was I there when you put the grommets in? I don't know.
Not for that, but you did. So we did put a pedal board together that I still have. Again, we reading through Guitar World magazine, discovering that Zach Wild essentially went to, Home Depot, got some wood, got a couple of door handles and Velcro and made a pedal board for himself. We thought, yeah, let's do that. So I remember that was a trip that we went to together, not the chain thing, but I bought some.
I remember the Explorer without the chain part of it,
absolutely.
But that was way before. But
that was way before.
That chain, it must have been ungodly, uncomfortable. Just
terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, and I just kept on doing it because it just felt like a
we didn't realize
cool thing to do.
Zach wears leather vests.
Zach wears leather vests. Plus, he doesn't only have a chain.
No, he's
got like a strap with
he does
parts of chain only on two sides.
He also does right now. He barely. I don't even know if he does chain anymore. But he does
not for years.
Really thick leather straps.
Exactly,
yeah.
Which makes sense because it disperses the weight and it's better for your whole body. Things that so I mean, if anyone is gleaning useful information,
it was cool at the time.
It was cool at the time. Exactly. Don't use a chain for a guitar strap.
Remember you playing that JCM 800 in the corral with on a. It was kind of like the real stage at the time because I don't know what era Sharks did the Renault on the. It was probably around that time too. So Sharks playing with the full stack there is just like. In this little bar, nobody does that. Right?
No, there's no need. And I mean, I wouldn't turn it up past 1.5. There's no need to be that loud. The cool thing is I could hear myself, with the thing in the ear level. Yeah. So I mean, It was like some kind of foofy-haired, hairy person with a chain guitar strap, Explorer with like these string ends sticking out because I would never cut those for some reason.
They must have
that was my thing.
Yeah, they must have put in that stage some point in 2004. Maybe I seen Mike play in a band at that time.
Okay.
In Fred or in Sharks at the time.
Yep.
It must have been because like I remember them putting in the stage in, and then like it had like this laminate flooring, and then Stacy had this thing, and most stages like are made out of like they're like plywood, right? Essentially, like painted plywood, that like it's roughed in, right? It's not like stages are usually they're not nice looking if you ever look on a floor of a stage, and so Stacy had a habit of like taking his because most drummers play on some sort of carpet.
Exactly.
And he would take the carpet and take tuck tape, which is like
very
it's
sticky
like
tape.
duct tape except for on steroids.
Exactly.
I think that most people know what tuck tape is anyways. It's like, so he'd tape it down to the floor with tuck tape. Well, this new floor they got in at Sharks here was like laminate flooring, and what he's ripping up the carpet and pulls off a board of the laminate flooring and
absolutely
kind of taps it back in
and we leave, and that was never mentioned.
Like luckily John now is done the right thing, and it's a normal stage floor. So
absolutely. And I think we can take a second to again give a shout out to John at Better Than Fred's for doing what he's done in creating not just a great vibe and a wonderful bar, but also just an incredible live venue. And being very welcoming and inviting, and creating a good space for not only again supporting local bands, but bringing in just quality national and international bands here to Grande Prairie. I mean, it's
and he's made that stage look like a stage. Like stage, that's the crazy part.
The lights,
like I remember
everything.
And it was Fred's for sure. Before John renoed it, but he lived with that stage for quite a long time.
Exactly.
In fact, I think the last time I played here, which was I think on one of the last Peace Starts at Home, we played like a set not in the thing, but like opening for the thing. I don't know, something like that.
Got it.
That's with Landsguard and Sean Thompson actually from Dirty Lemur was actually the drummer at that time. And anyways, the stage looked dramatically different because the walls behind it were all white with pictures on it, right?
Oh, that's right. I remember that, yes.
And it still had this slick, laminate floor is terrible for a stage because it's slick, right? And it's
the second you spill a drink, and that happened to us a bunch. We would get water or beer or something and like put it on the side of stage. We would walk around, try and rock out or something. Somebody would kick something, and then the stage would just be slippery as heck. And again, lessons learned. You do these things and you figure out not to do them.
We digress.
We digress. That's okay. Well, so 2004. Were you playing in Landsguard at the time?
No, it was 2005. Yeah.
Really?
So I think in late 2004, that's how much things. It was only 2003 and 2004 that No One's Alone was like 2003. Half of that year was you guys cutting your teeth.
Absolutely.
Without getting a drummer for most of that, right?
Totally.
And then
2004,
you guys did a lot of shows. It was, you guys probably played weekly, I gotta say, at least
and I mean,
every weekend.
We did. And I mean, there'd be, we do everything from like a 45-minute set opening for a band at BJ's, playing a thing at Howlers, to playing like 3 sets at Sharks, 3 sets at BJ's. There was there were more than one time. There were multiple occasions where we would play a set somewhere, opening, and then drive across town to play a headlining set somewhere else.
And you also played I have a lot of this old set lists for some reason, and you guys had sometimes did 3 sets a night, and you guys that summer did the Cancer Walk thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was you put every song that you guys knew on that list because it was
had to fill up 3 hours of time essentially. Which was incredible because it was raining, it was cold, but I mean, again, it was a great cause. We're so happy to have been offered that, and again, it gave us a chance to play every single thing we had, workshop new material.
You guys had played covers for a little bit that
covers,
time. You guys were never ever a real cover band because Cato really didn't dig it, and
Totally.
and he. to give him credit, he tried it a lot.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
He tried quite a few songs.
Yep.
And in the end, you guys had like a few of them that you kind of pulled out every once in a while.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you guys only did covers to fill like time sometimes.
Yeah, exactly.
If you had like 3 sets to do or something like that.
Might do 2 covers each set max.
Yeah,
like
you guys
that's
did Pain for Pleasure and Breaking the
which
Law,
was so much fun. Oh my gosh, again. I mean, part of this is because Cadel had this virtuosic vocal range where he could do that falsetto Rob Halford kind of thing. And I mean, for me, you know, again, being into a lot of the music that I was into, everything from like Deep Purple through, you know, Soundgarden and Audioslave, for example, just had that kind of, you know, having the option to go high vocally like that was so awesome, you know, and so it was great to showcase that whenever we could.
Yeah. And during that must have been during that 2004 year, you guys would have like opened for the Salads and that whole thing.
Right. And
you guys would have with Jeffrey Says out of
Jeffrey Says from Victoria.
So a bunch of Canadian bands, like it wasn't Deep Fried Grind probably.
Deep Fried Grind, Broken Nose. You know, a bunch of these Edmonton bands, Marble Engine
too. Yeah.
There were a lot of bands. Staggered Crossing.
Who did you open at the Corral for? There's a
Tom Cochran. We played a few shows that we opened for Tom Cochran.
I didn't
at the
ever
Corral.
see Tom Cochran.
No way. Yeah. That was pretty awesome. I mean, you know.
See, I didn't
amazing.
see every single show because,
of course.
But I was there for a lot of it.
I
can't believe I didn't realize I missed Tom Cochran for some reason.
Tom Cochran. We opened for the Headstones. A bunch of great Canadian bands and a bunch of other bands coming through BJ's from all over. So that was 2004. We gigged a ton. We started playing out in Edmonton and Calgary as well. Yeah. And I think that was kind of it. Like we didn't play into BC or anything like that. But we started becoming part of the Edmonton music scene, which was, again, supportive and amazing with just a great pool of talent.
Where were you guys practicing at the end of 2004?
That's what I can't remember. You know, like I
think it's Corey Sewell's.
I think that's when we transitioned to Corey. So probably like we played at Neil's place a little bit. Over the winter time, we played at the Rising Society in the springtime. We played at Neil's grandparents' place in the spring.
One thing I wanted to say about Neil's grandparents' place, that's where like it went from 8 songs to like 20 songs.
100%.
Yeah, you guys wrote a lot there.
Yeah. We played. You know, we would. We try to jam 3 times. I mean, we were trying to go as hard as possible. You know, and so aside from playing almost weekly, multiple sets a night, you know, multiple nights a week, we would try to jam. We would try to jam 2 to 3 times a week, all the time, you know, and we took it as seriously as we could. And again, that meant, you know, practicing the days that we weren't jamming. So we would show up to jams already practiced up and ready to workshop material, which is the way one should hold a jam, you know, in hindsight, of course. And then that fall, I feel like that entire fall and winter is when we practiced at Corey Sewell's place, which is amazing. I mean, you know, she ran her own business, all this kind of stuff. She had a house, and we took over one quarter of her basement. And I think we left our stuff set up there, which was amazing.
You guys were recording a little bit with James Oldenburg, I think, at the time too.
Yeah. So after we recorded ourselves, James Oldenburg, who again, an incredible musician, incredible producer, mentor to all of us, you know, said, "This is great." Like, you know, for a super discount, you know, we recorded with him, and so we put out some singles. I feel like we put out the Napkin song. That got on the radio a little bit. Then we recorded True Love, which which was spun on the radio a whole bunch at the time. It's not like, you know, it was like a big deal, but it was on the radio enough that we could say like, hey, this song is on the radio, and people would know it when we would play it live in town, which is super cool. And then, so that fall and winter we spent practicing Corey Sewell's place, 2004 through 2005. In 2005, I feel like things... I want to say start getting weird, but the dynamic was changing. So it was all, you know, it was all getting different.
Well,
it's all changing up.
So which I don't know, maybe it has something to do with this, but it's that's when. So in the fall, like in the fall, like winter, start of winter, whatever. That's when me and Cadel started hanging out and like trying to play some music together or whatever. And I was like barely a musician probably at that time, right? So I knew some things.
Well, first of all, you're super humble. You should give yourself some credit. Like
I wasn't good, that's for sure. I wouldn't call myself good in any regard in that scenario. But Cadel saw something. I think that Cadel saw something that he could work with, and the idea was because like No One's Alone was evolving into something that had many voices, where Landsgaard was
just him and his vision, and that's it. Yep.
And it was me and him, but in a way that, because I kind of disagreed with most of the things he was doing, because we had some similar ground that we were working off of. Like we kind of knew what we wanted to do, right? Which was very simple, that COC vibe-ish, but spin our own way. And so, because I definitely wasn't a songwriter at that time, or I never wrote anything or anything like that. So it was, I was there to color the songs or play some lead work and help do that. And so we started playing, and he knew that. I don't know where he met Jay. Like Jason?
Jay Greeno, yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Jay
know.
was probably playing around town. Jay also worked at GP Music, didn't he?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, like a lot of this, many of the connections that we made
he
also
did work there,
in the really the pre sort of internet YouTube,
you were talking about
kind of era was based around GP Music.
There was a messaging board in GP Music on the back wall by the acoustic room. Absolutely. And that, I think, spawned a lot of stuff, right? Like... possibly some part of Prevail would have been because of that, I think.
Totally.
But no, Cadel probably was. He was a constantly going to GP Music, and it was GP Music at the time, which wasn't long equated. Just a shout out, just a quick thing, like some major influences on my guitar playing and stuff like that, and like me being interested in music and everything. Like the guys at GP Music were awesome. From like everybody there that worked there,
absolutely.
Like
oh my gosh.
Between 1997 and whenever it turned into Long McQuaid and after, honestly, like
totally. To this day, of course.
Yes, to this day. But for the GP Music era, like Mike Monroe was like awesome, super knowledgeable of everything, and Dave Wright was like he was there was many I think with more than just me. I think Cadel talked very philosophically with Dave a lot about music and life and everything like that, right? So Dave's a super awesome guy, right?
Totally.
And then there was like even Gary and Daryl.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, Daryl the owner, Daryl Sweetnam, of course.
Yeah. And then, I mean, Dave sold me my first guitar, and like all these guys helped in like carving our path through figuring out music and stuff like that. So
absolutely, it's like the if you watch the movie High Fidelity, for example, it's like record store with characters who not only sell you stuff, but they offer advice on certain things. The High Fidelity, of course, is kind of exaggerated to make it what it is. But a similar thing with GP Music. Everyone there was, as you said, knowledgeable in terms of gear, also music, also had been around the block, had gigged, or they were gigging currently, and so they could offer a lot of advice on whatever ridiculous things that we were thinking about or wanting to do. From like, hey, I want to get rid of this and put that in. They'll say, whoa, hold on, why? Are you sure? Like, think about it this way. To all sorts of stuff, man. Songwriting.
One time I got a gift from somebody that they went in, and I was looking at, I think, for a phaser or whatever, like a Phase 90.
Yep.
And Al Peterson knew that I was looking for that and told them to buy it, and it was a total surprise gift.
Oh wow!
And it was like the Eddie Van Halen.
Eddie, yeah, man.
And that phaser is like deadly, dude.
See,
that's
and
a
that's
good phaser.
I think that means I think that sound means that the camera died. And actually, because of the time, maybe this is a good time for us to pause and pick it up again, because it's like
just a little bit more, I think.
A little bit more?
Yeah, let me finish off until like let's get to the end of Landsgaard, I guess, which is only like so Landsgaard was only around for like a 6-month period, which caused some contention in like Neil was really concerned about Cadel's like being in that band, but it was never really a competition or anything like that.
Exactly.
And I never when Landsgaard, I don't know what the other guys were thinking, but I didn't really because I'd been around since the start of No One Alone, like the initial start.
Good friend and the whole thing. Yeah.
So we talked to Neil, and I think he understood what was going on a little bit, and then but my intention was never to like get in the way of it, because
of course.
And I had plans to go to university later that summer, and so it was only going to be for.
Did you go in summer 2005 or?
It was summer 2005. Yeah,
okay, got it.
So it was only for a short period of time, anyways, right?
A year, like several months.
It was like 7 or 8 months, right?
Got it.
And I mean, in that 8 months, and we talked about James Oldenburg recording for No One's Alone. Well, he recorded we started out. Me and Kittle did the old school way, which is like through the sound card. It's cool that a pro thing.
Yeah.
That's how we recorded. And then Ryan Thorson was playing bass, and Jay, we like mic'd the crap out of his little bedroom. Like we had mics in the hallway, and like his closet had the mixing board in it and stuff like that. And we cut his drums on that, and we recorded one song that way. And it was like recorded in my apartment, and like with we put our amps in like a closet with pillows over them, right? To try to like get decent, like I was using a Marshall,
get some volume,
40 watt JCM 2000 40 watt combo 112, right? And Cato was probably using something PV and something cheap, right? Like Rage or a Studio, that's his. That's what
he always had like these little things. He'd crank them up and get good tone.
Good tone, but I mean like the starter amp, right?
Totally.
Of PV. And but anyways, we recorded that whole song that way, and then we opened for a bunch of bands like Bull Moose, Crown Kings,
Crown King, that's right.
Robin Black, right?
That's right.
Yeah. He got a little bit of fame in Canada at that time. And then we played Howlers, and we played at Sharks, and that was, I don't think we ever played BJ's.
Got it.
And we played a Battle of the Bands. Al was playing there, and Cato actually, we won it. So with Landsgaard,
awesome.
And won we could have played at Fred's. We never actually ended up doing that, but yeah. So that's kind of where like Landsgaard was, and it was it was it was so quick and so short. It was but we did have 8 songs in the end, and James actually recorded those 8 songs.
I remember
for us.
that.
Yeah.
Which
And for very, I have no idea what we paid him.
Got it.
Yeah, but it wasn't a lot of money.
And that's just it. I mean, and again, it comes down to sort of community support. James was a person.
If we paid him, I don't know, because we recorded one night. We did it all in one night.
Wow, that's amazing.
Off the floor, basically, all off the floor, all playing at the same time. Some isolation in there, but not very much.
Got it.
And it sounds okay.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound like a record.
Sure.
Made it. Like, it doesn't sound pro, but it did something, right?
Does the trick.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think there was actually another time. Didn't you guys open for Tupelo Honey, right? No One's Alone.
We did.
And Landsgaard played that same night.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep. That was at Howlers, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Tupelo
I think
Honey?
that we were
a great show.
That's when we we had the EP, which was like 1 live tune and 3 live tracks and 1 studio track. And we sold that at that show, and they people were buying the shit out of it. I don't know why.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, again, you guys had a great sound. It was different than No One's Alone, and it was great.
Who were the 2 guys running Howlers at the time? Paul McLean. Yeah, and who's the other guy?
I don't know.
I'd have to look at the record, but those guys are the ones who recorded on the CD, and we paid them for the recording. They did it as a project, but they put extra work in it to make it sound better.
Oh, right, exactly, because they were taking the audio program. At the
time.
I
mean, we might have paid them like $180 or something like that. It was a percentage, and we cut it properly. I think they thought we were going to sell it longer, but we then recorded with James, and we weren't going to sell that anymore.
Yeah, of course, that makes sense.
So, but I don't think they like that very much. But it was awesome that they did that for us. It certainly helped us as a band, get something out there, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then we played for that time, and then I moved away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
we could probably fill more in on the Landsguard side of things, and then continue on with the No One's Alone stuff at the next time.
Sure, absolutely. I think again, like there's so much ground to cover, and the more we get into it, the more is revealed. One thing about that whole situation, I think, in terms of Landsguard and Catel's thing was. I can only speak for myself, but I mean, I think in hindsight, exactly as you described, No One's Alone went from being a thing that Catel had complete control over to, being a situation where everyone in the band was contributing to writing and all that kind of stuff.
He definitely wanted a different outlet, and I don't think
and he needed an outlet for himself that was all his own thing, which is understandable.
I don't think that he, at that point, had anything, like he wanted to play in No One's Alone. That was his thing, and like, that's why he just wanted something else. And Catel was like, the guy lived, breathed, ate music, right? So I mean, that's all he did. He still has like songs he hasn't done anything with because he's got so many. That's the thing. Like he's got hundreds of songs. Like, so the bank is never closed on him, right? So,
exactly.
So probably the point we should end at is actually, it all leads up to this. The piece starts at home.
Exactly.
The first piece starts at home with Chris Thiessen put on.
Yeah.
And that was at Sharks
Summer 2005.
Summer 2005, and that's where we should start talking at the next one.
Absolutely. So, real quick to wrap it up, Peace Starts at Home was an idea that Chris Thiessen had to have I don't know how to
Battle of the Bands,
but also it was his whole vibe was to be socially conscious, to be mindful, to be to sort of bring people together, and so it was a Battle of the Bands, but really what it did was give every single band in town the opportunity to play many shows over the summertime in an elimination thing. Yes, Battle of the Bands, multiple rounds, all leading up to playing a big, huge show at Muskogee Park at the amphitheater. And so the room that we're sitting in, which is the back room at Better Than Fred's, this kind of became, where the GP music scene, I feel, hit critical mass. This was the tipping point kind of where everyone who was in a band who had been playing music for ages, whether it's bands that have been sort of in existence for several months to a year or a few years, or was the latest project of artists who had been busy and prolific in the area for who knows 7, 8, 9 years, beginning with Albanos, The Compass, that whole scene that we were talking about. Chris brought everyone together to pitch this idea, to have everyone working together, have everyone, give everyone the opportunity to play a ton over the summer, and then yes, in an elimination kind of fashion, whittle it down to some finalists who would play in Muskogee Park. They'd bring in a panel of judges, industry people who would offer advice, and then somebody would be the winner. And so 2005, the summer 2005, July, was when that happened. And so I feel like we all sat around here May of 2005. Almost every single musician in town that had active bands with Chris and talked about this, coming together and making it happen. And we did, and it was spectacular. But, as I said, for me, I believe it's, again, a tipping point.
You bring up something. So I said that we won that Battle of the Bands before, and that was the Howlers one, so that's not the Peace Starts at Home thing. And, like, to this, I swear, like, Al, you should have won that, by the way. And you guys probably would have played Fred's, so you guys even... It would have been way better if you did. Charlene, was that the...
Charlene, yep.
Charlene at Howlers loved Catel. She was a super fan, and we totally tipped the scales because of that. I mean, we played 4 songs that night, and we won, so we had to go back and play another song. But we only had 4 songs, so we had to play one of the other songs again. And I mean, the style of music we're playing had no business... it was not definitely good music, but it wasn't like the Battle of the Bands winning type of music that Boy Charlie was playing at the time. And Al, you should have won that for sure.
Hey man, That's amazing.
That's on the
There you go.
record.
Well, so they won the second Peace Starts at Home, right? Boy Charlie, I believe.
Yeah.
First one was
but they should have won that one. They would have
At
done
Howlers.
more with
I
it.
gotcha.
And anyways, sometimes that's how things happen. But
That's how she goes,
We had
as
like
they say.
a competitive edge there, but we didn't. As you will find out next time, we didn't have a Landscar didn't have a competitive edge on the Peace Starts at Home contest. We got paired in the worst.
Oh my gosh.
Worst grouping.
Well,
and
you know what?
We'll talk about
We'll
that.
talk about that.
next
This
time.
is the perfect time to stop. And hey, we're gonna have a part 3, man. I mean, there's so much, and I'm appreciative of your time. Thank you for coming out. The previous thing went way longer than anticipated, and I'm glad to have this conversation and to
Part
continue it
18
next time.
coming soon.
I'm sure, man. Thank you and good night.
Yeah.